All right, let's get to it. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, guys. Why don't you, I don't know who wants to go first or how do you want to do this, but tell me about yourselves, your organization, and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can start it off, and then like Prakash said, he can kind of fill in. So hi, my name is Melissa. I am the US lead for design thinking enablement and products and services. So really that's just a fancy word that means we try to use design thinking to marry our experience strategy, business strategy, technology strategy, and data strategy together to create innovation in the areas of product and services, as well as business strategy. And we use design thinking as a way to kind of get the collaboration we need from our clients, as well as the internal collaboration that's required to put great strategists of very, very different perspectives together into a very central and enabling strategy. Our organization is Mindtree, which I can tell you about in just a second. Prakash, maybe you introduce yourself first.
Sure. So yeah, Prakash here, glad to be on the show, based out of Dallas. I lead the consulting practice for data and intelligence for Mindtree. So yeah, any data-driven innovations, how the data and services feed into the product and services, that's all my portfolio. I work with quite a bit of clients in that particular area, on the Fortune 500 clients.
Yeah, and so to tell you a little bit about Mindtree and then our roles, I think will make more sense. So Mindtree is a company that has been around for 20 years. It was from the inception co-headquartered in Bangalore as well as Warren, New Jersey. We have a really nice innovation studio in Warren, and now we are in more than 18 countries with innovation studios around the world in places like London,
Wow.
Seattle, New York, Bangalore, of course, Frankfurt, and we have most of our digital transformation business sits in the US. So what we noticed over time, because it started off more of, the software development and maintained services space. And what we noticed over time was that expectation, especially when long-term partnerships come into play of the client, is that you need to be consultative. So what does that mean, right? And so they started off by creating what was called the Digital Pumpkin, which is where me and a few of the people—
I love the name, by the way. Did you come up with that?
No, that was the founder of the Digital Pumpkin, and the idea was it's actually shaped like a pumpkin. The idea is that's where all the magic happens, right? And I think in Indian culture, but also in American culture, pumpkins have a way of kind of resembling magic. You have the story of Cinderella, and you have a few other kind of, even within like the Harry Potter, right, universe and franchise. And so we wanted to emulate that and emulate kind of the magic and creativity that comes together to create future state innovation, right? Because you really do have to step outside of the world that you live into to think about what the world may look like tomorrow to be able to do that. And so that physically and through our branding, we wanted to enable that. And eventually that became kind of a larger suite of solutions that included data strategy, that included cloud strategy, core modernization, all of these kind of key elements to play into a larger ecosystem strategy. So our innovation lab became a consulting group. So we kind of sit at the forefront of that. And I named a few of our core offerings. It's product services and strategy, it's core modernization, it's cloud transformation, it's data strategy, it's customer success, from a marketing perspective especially. And again, I think, if we had to talk about differentiators, this isn't a pitch, but it's, might as well put it out there. It's the fact that we bring together people of all disciplines under one roof. And that is something, I won't call out the name, but I come from other consulting competitors, and so do a lot of our teammates. And we can truly say that in those shops, the designers are separate than the business consultants, are separate than the data strategists, and they may work from time to time on projects. We literally do everything 24 hours a day or 40 hours a week together. And that has allowed us to really be able to identify strategic fusions, which is kind of where we thrive, and that's our niche.
Yeah. Just to add to that, right? Right now, most of the companies are undergoing that larger digital transformation, right? Because they want to be relevant to the market, and they also want to make sure they are addressing to their consumers or customers their needs and so on and so forth. And they are all undergoing this transition. So what makes us kind of unique, to Mel's point, was like this is the team that kind of brings everything together. Because when you're talking about large digital transformation, whatever that we talk about in terms of the product and services, the data, the cloud, and everything has to come into play. And it's more of a synergized effort rather than just those individual building blocks. And that's where this organization kind of sits at the forefront within the larger Mindtree ecosystem, kind of stitching everything together for our clients.
Now, there's a lot of definitions of digital transformation and what digital transformation really is. I mean, you ask anybody, they'll give you a different answer. What does it mean for you guys?
See, for us, digital transformation and business transformation kind of go hand in hand. So what are we here addressing is really a business need and how the technology and everything kind of caters to that. And eventually leading to the success of the business in terms of revenue. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the value that you're creating based off of this transformation, enabled by technology, by data, by innovations, and so on and so forth. That's how we kind of see it. It's like a larger enterprise-wide business transformation enabled by technology.
Yeah, and I think the key there too is that it is agnostic of solutions up front. So a lot of our clients come in and they'll say, you know, we heard that like we have to get on the cloud. So can you help us get on the cloud? And it's a great opportunity, especially with clients come to you asking for that solution up front, but we actually take the opportunity to take a step back in those type of conversations and enter any technology there, right? Because if you don't take the time to really assess why you need to be on a certain technology or what those needs that are making you think that you need to be in a certain technology, you may either one, be completely invest in the wrong technology, or two, like miss out on opportunities to enable maybe some of the business opportunities that you may have otherwise. And that's what we see a lot. And so what we try to do, especially because we don't just work with the CTO suite or the CIO suite, we work with CMOs, we work with CEOs, and we try to bring them all in those conversations. Because even if it is a cloud transformation, well, what does that actually mean for the experience of your customers, for the experience of your employers, for the experience of your partners, as well as how that can enable your business strategy, like Prakash was saying.
Is it typically the CTO or somebody in the technology space that talks to you guys first, or do you get an innovation person? Who typically talks to you first?
It starts there. So it starts with the CTO or the CIO organization, but I think it's their mandate as well, right, to completely change that technology landscape. So it starts there. And eventually what ends up happening is when we do this visioning exercise, right, we are just not talking about the next 2 years for the organization. We are talking about 5 years and beyond the 5 years, where that organization wants to be. And if they want to be a leader in that space, how everything in terms of their business capabilities and innovation and technology and data, everything can come together for them to reach there. So though it starts with the CIO, CTO organization in most of the cases, but eventually it becomes like an enterprise-wide phenomenon where we eventually end up having all the executives come on board and make sure that all of them are aligned in that vision that we are going to achieve in the next 5 years, and how we can kind of break it down and see how it will eventually evolve into that larger vision with the current state that they have and the future state that they are envisioning and they will eventually end up with.
And what's interesting too, which we've seen especially over the last year, is getting more CMOs coming to us first. And the reason why that is because especially within the marketing, lead generation, just being able to acquire and retain customers, it's become a very heavily influenced area by technology. You have the sales, any of the CRMs, but it's expanding among that too. Even CRM technologies are actually growing into just like customer success portals, which is why you keep hearing that word, customer success. So when we're first initiating our engagements with a client, because that's a big differentiator too, it is through the CIO and CTOs. We're hearing more from the CMOs, but once we have that established relationship with our clients, that we actually get the CEOs coming to us a lot more as well, because when they see a strategic opportunity to kind of go from point A to point B, and they don't feel like they have the right tools or the right they're not in the right headspace to understand how to enable that jump, that's when they come to us, because over time they see the technology is an enabler. It's not one or the other. It's not taking out, and disenfranchising employees or your business strategies. It's actually just helping you really harness your energy where you want to harness it.
Right. See, most of my audience is corporate innovators and startup founders. So I was thinking about like a chief innovation officer, that the leader, the innovation leader within the organization. Would they be? Do you usually have them coming to you? Because a lot of times you can't innovate internally because you just don't have the staff and you can't build things. I mean, do they come to you as well?
Yeah. So it's actually really interesting, and it has two different flavors. So I'll kind of speak about both. One of the flavors is, hey, we know innovation is important. We were tasked with that. We're having a hard time actually implementing it within organizations. So we call that innovation as a service. So how do you actually successfully take up innovation, which people have been talking about forever? And whether it's a bottom-up approach or top-down approach, it requires kind of people who have done it time and time and time again to truly be able to do it within an organization. And I think anyone in the consulting space will also appreciate this. Sometimes it's just better hearing it from someone not in your organization. And there is, the politics behind that third party point of view and the frameworks, all of that make it less politicized and actually help people come to the table. So there is that aspect for sure. The other aspect, of course, is, hey, I'm in this industry. I only know what I know. You work across industries. And that's usually where innovation can more easily happen. It's cross-pollination, right? It's identifying trends that happen in other areas. And because we are so good at extracting the needs and the business strategy, it is then creating some sort of customized strategy based off of what we already know, but to you. And, as easy and intuitive as it seems for people who are innovators, it is so difficult for people who don't know and don't have that muscle to do that. So we bring a lot of value, and I think a lot of your audience can also appreciate the value that is brought when you're able to do something as simple as connecting the dots in a different way.
Yeah. And when we start doing this visioning exercise, right, the chief innovation officer role kind of plays a very crucial role in that, because they have those ideas in terms of where their organization needs to be from 5 years down the line. But the thing with the innovation is the kind of adoption or the kind of recognition that you can get in terms of the feasibility of implementation of those ideas itself. So there are two things there. So one is the things that you're already doing, how you can make it more innovative and how you can make it more consumable through that innovation. And the second one is completely thinking radical in terms of, in 5 years down the line, if I'm not doing this, I'm going to be obsolete. So they kind of bring in both those worlds together, and they kind of use us as those messengers as well. So we kind of end up kind of stitching all that dot together, and that's where bringing all the CXOs into one kind of thought process and making sure that we are tackling to the short term, near term, as well as the long term needs.
And typically, your first engagement is sort of like the development side, right? Somebody says, "Oh, I need you to build X," and then you're moving to something else. Has it ever come the other way where somebody says, "We don't know what we want to build. We want you to help us decide what that is"?
Yeah, so actually, I think when the group was first starting, it was a little bit more typical. Hey, we have this idea in terms of development, help us build that. But now that we've been around for 3 or 4 years and have kind of those established relationships with our clients, it is definitely more of, hey, this is a strategy that we need to enable. How do we do that? And this is where I kind of want to make a plug for experience strategy, because experience strategy has helped us really bridge the gap of how do we do what we know we need to do, but we have no idea where to get started. And starting with the experience of your core, and it's not just customers, right? It's users in general. We've been doing a lot of B2B, B2B2C work recently, because what people are realizing is it's all about the ecosystem. And so Amazon was the first one who really cracked the code. So shout out to Amazon, but now everybody wants a piece of it, right? And so you're seeing Netflix kind of created. You're seeing like all these big players in different industries trying to create their version of an ecosystem. But how do you really do that? And it does start with experience. So you think about the experience that you're trying to put out for your partners, for their customers, then for your own customers, for your own internal people. And that in itself then allows you to be able to extract on the business capabilities that you need to enable that. And then of course the data that kind of stitches it all together, and ultimately the infrastructure and the technology that is required to put it together. But at the forefront, really, it's experience, and it's experience in a way that isn't just, hey, these are the screens that we need you to put together. No, no, no. It is literally from the moment that that person hears about your brand, again, whether it's a partner, an employee, or a customer, to the point that they're interacting with you, yes, maybe digitally, but you know, the future of design is supposedly screenless. So then what does that mean for your company, for your institutions as well?
Yeah, and just piggybacking on your earlier point, right? See, typically we don't get most of it as a development request. Rather, to Mel's point, right, Melissa's point, the request that we are coming is business challenges. So at the that's what we get from our clients. They want to solve for a particular business challenge, because when you think of a business challenge that we want to solve, the technology, the data, and everything are just going to be the enablers. At the end of the day, we are solving for a business problem that is going to give them a revenue or a more customer base, and so on and so forth. So it all starts there. And the experience element of it and the data element of it, like Melissa was saying, it all kind of feeds into that. But where we are starting is with that business challenge and making sure that we are solving for the challenge rather than like a development project or something like that.
So how defined does that challenge has to be? I mean, is it could it be general, like, oh, we need to increase revenues for a particular market segment, or it could be more specific, like, oh, we want to target this category and increase profitability in this specific space? I mean, what do you typically get?
Yeah, see, for it, there are smaller problems, but there are very huge problems as well. Like, for example, let's say if we are just talking about an industry that is completely changing, for example, hospitality industry, right? With Airbnb is coming.
Everything's completely changing. Come on.
Everything, yeah, exactly.
Disruption is everywhere.
Everywhere, yes. Absolutely. That's where this becomes so critical, right? I can't just look at one small element saying I want to improve the customer base. Yes, that is necessary. But at the end of the day, when we are doing this visioning in 5 years, who are the disruptors who are going to take that market share away from you? That's their worry in most of the cases. And they're still grappling to the effect saying, can I just keep my business running as is? Or if I need to think 5 years down the line, if I'm thinking 5 years down the line, what kind of investment I need to make right now so that I'm ready for that 5 years when there is somebody who's kind of creeping up and going to occupy my space. So it could be a smaller one, but it could be way larger than what we can imagine. So we kind of tackle both.
Yeah, and the great thing about, so just like a quick thought too, right? The great thing about what Prakash is saying and the trends that we're seeing in the market, because disruption is everywhere. So you look at the biggest players in any space, what are they? They are no longer traditional service providers. They are data, they are technology, they are platform, and they are marketplace providers. And they are competing and completely pushing out all the traditional providers. So number one, like, you want to stay alive in any industry today, figure out how you are going to become a data, a technology, a platform, or whatever provider. And I think that's becoming increasingly clear to the Fortune 500 C-suite, which puts us in a great position, right? Because then we're like, okay, great, so that's out of the way. So what is your value proposition? What is your value proposition in terms of data? What is your value proposition in terms of technology? You know, it's not good enough to just being able to be the best. I mean, Uber is a great example of that, right? Uber isn't the best rideshare service. They are the best rideshare platform. And they were able to meet supply and demand where they meet and kind of monetize that. And you're seeing it with Netflix, you're seeing it with Spotify, you're seeing it with Zillow, you're seeing it with all these big brands across industries. So that in itself is great. The other like irony sometimes when we get, especially when people are very product and service oriented, they'll start talking about, well, we don't want to talk about business strategy. We just want to talk about our product strategy. And it's like, well, I hate to break it to you, but it's kind of one and the same, right? Your product strategy is your business strategy. Your proposition to your customers, to your partners, a big part of that is your product strategy. So if they don't go hand in hand, you're losing out on potential market share. Someone else will come in and they will actually be able to tie together their business strategy to their product strategy, to their data strategy, and it comes off very clearly in the way that the customer experiences and the partners experience that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the platform aspect, because I've talked about platformization for years and years and years, and there's so much sort of drag against it because these people are saying, I mean, for example, take a typical financial services company. Oh, they're a bank, they've got to face the customer, they provide all these services, they put so much money into infrastructure and talking to customers directly and yada, yada, yada. But the customers are like, I don't want to do all these things. I just want, to own a home. I don't want to get a mortgage. So it's like the market's pressuring them to go further down in the stack and become more of a platform, but they're fighting against it because they think they have this, full stack business. So how do you convince companies that, that's a way to go too?
Yep. So we are doing a lot of work in this space. And so, when we spoke originally, it's the space of entrepreneurship. It's the space of open ecosystems. It's the space of API strategy. And they all kind of go hand in hand. And Prakash will be able to give you the much more technical lens on it. But what I will say is today, companies are realizing that it's not good enough, like you said, because the customers are putting the pressure. It's not good enough to only provide what you have in scope. It's actually much more monetarily beneficial and financially beneficial if you are the one-stop shop, one-stop place. And so what does that mean for you? That means, number one, your business units need to let go of their ego and kind of stop trying to hang on to what they think the value is, because there's much more value in partnering with potential competitors, partnering with people who may need the data that you have, that you're so rich in. And so that kind of goes hand in hand to what we were saying, why data is becoming such an important part of business strategy. And so, yeah, the clients that we work with, a lot of them are like, well, I see other big players in other industries are doing that. And they bring us in wanting to start transitioning in that way. And the biggest challenge that we have in implementing those strategies are the business units, and the value that they think they've provided because they've worked 20 years to provide that value. And so trying to get them to and be convinced on why it's actually more beneficial for them, again, financially, that they let go of that mentality it's a huge task.
Yeah. And yeah, just on that point, right? See, platformization, and this, right? Eventually, everything that is happening right now is consumer centric. Either it's a D2C or a B2B2C. But at the end of the day, you are going to basically satisfy the needs of your consumer, and that's all it's boiling down to. And we've seen it in the past with multiple conversations. In that case, the thing is, the platform that you're developing has to answer or has to make sure that the value that you're providing reaches the customer in real time. And that's where the data and intelligence also kind of plays a vital role, because you're pushing those recommendations through those platforms to your consumers. And that's where exactly you're adding value to the consumers. And to your point, why the industry is moving towards that, because it's moving towards a consumer focused point of views across the board. And even if you're a B2B, you're thinking about the end consumers in terms of the B2B2C. And platformization is the only way you can reach the consumers directly, and how you can add value to the consumers across their journey is what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that goes back to design thinking. And people say design thinking, but in all the instances I've seen over the last little while, they call it design thinking, but it's not. Like, the customer's not in the room. I mean, how do you convince companies to actually bring the customer into the room and say, you got to listen to these guys. You have to understand what they want, and you have to. It's like Chris Christensen's latest thing about the. I don't know if you heard about the milkshake thing. The milkshake thing he was talking about, like, it's a job to be done. It's like, what do the customer actually want to be done? and there's a disconnect between what the customer wants and what the business is providing. And it's like the business is like, oh, they got to come over to me. And it's like, no, we got to go over there.
I love that you brought that up, because that is literally my one job, is when we're working with clients to convince them. And that's our biggest pet peeve, right? Like, we give our whole pitch. We're like, we're design thinking first. Like, we do everything, business strategy, cloud strategy, data strategy with design thinking methodology. And then they come in and they're like, oh, no, but take it through us. And so this is where our approach may be controversial to some. We obviously, are very flexible in the approach, but sometimes it's better to show them instead of continuously tell them how it needs to be done. So we have a vast network of users in very, very many different industries. And sometimes we tag on those users just to give them some insights, some sound bites. And sometimes all it takes is hearing it directly from the consumer. And so what we do, and one of the exercises we love to do, especially when we're doing these open ecosystem strategies, is called, it's a valuation exercise. And so what that means is the following. It means, number one, so starting with the business, right? So business, what do you think is the value that you are providing to your consumers? What is the value that you think you are providing to your employees, to your different business units, to your different partners? And getting that first. And then going directly to those players and asking them, hey, consumer, what is the value that you think, or what is the value that you want to be receiving from your consumers, or sorry, from your partners, from whatever company we're talking to. And then the disconnect there is usually what gets people, right? That's where people are like, wow, so the consumers want this and we're giving them this. No wonder we're losing them at this part of the life cycle. And it can become extremely nuanced to business units, to different processes. And so we try to go in as deep as needed based on the strategy that we're trying to implement. But it's a really, really impactful exercise that resonates. And for us too, just a quick call out, like, yes, everything is moving towards consumers, but design thinking in itself is about user centricity, period, right? So sometimes, people will say, oh, well, I need a sales strategy to better help me reach the consumers, but then they leave the salespeople completely out of it. And it's like, well, part of your sales strategy are in fact your salespeople. So talking to everyone and every user who is impacted by a problem is also what we try to do in that lens that we try to bring in.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to the earlier discussion that we are having, right? Even for us to get that alignment within that organization is the challenging first step. If we are able to achieve that, then they are in the right direction, and we are able to kind of guide them through that journey completely. And that's what I think this, at least our team, specializes in bringing that executive alignment across the board, so that this gap is met and we are making sure that we are designing something that is futuristic while it also takes care of the current gaps that are already there and meeting them.
So I got to circle back a little bit to what you're saying about experience strategy. Can you go into a little more detail on exactly what that is and how it works?
Yeah. So experience strategy, and I'm not going to use the consulting words of omni-channel experience and all of
that. Oh, come
on. Right. I know you were waiting for it. So experience strategy is not just about UI strategy. So I want to differentiate a few things that are very clear to designers, but to non-designers, they start kind of thinking it's one and the same. So there's UI strategy, which is much more, what am I looking at on a screen potentially? And kind of the branding, the colors, the font sizes and everything, and all of that has a different strategy in the way that it's laid out, in the way that, you want to be able to highlight certain calls to action, all of that, right? And so that's what a lot of people think when we say experience strategy. They think that it's, oh, how pretty is my screen going to be? That's how we've heard some technologists and business people call it out.
Yeah, it's all about the way it looks, right? It's all about the way it looks.
It's not that simple. Experience strategy is more than that. So experience strategy, like I said, is not just about what is digitally available to your users. It's also about the messaging. It's about the content that gets pushed to them. It's about the interactions that you want to have. It's about the value that you are trying to provide each and every step of the way. And so it is, you walk into a store, it's the whole experience. It's not just the email that I got before that prompted me to walk into a store. It's not just about the interactions that I'm having with the salespeople in those stores. It's not just about the recommendations that I receive after I walk out of that store. It's everything. And so when we best describe experience strategy, we like to use the word phygital, if you've heard that word. And the word phygital is obviously a word, play on words of physical and digital combined, because that's where our world is, right? Our world is not just digital, it's not just physical, it's understanding in all the physical interactions that you want to maintain, because we're physical humans. We're not, you know, bots in an alternate universe.
Not yet.
So,
One day.
Yeah, maybe person experience makes reality, right? But so that's part of it. We want to maintain the authenticity of those interactions, but then how does digital play into that? And how does digital push people to then those physical experiences? And so for each industry that looks different, for each industry and strategy that also the end point is different. But the idea is if you take a look at it from just a UI perspective, you'll never actually be able to kind of tag in the other channels that are not digital. And that's where experience strategy really kind of lies. Does that sort of explain it?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, but it's still making me think customer journey. Is it like how it's beyond customer journey, right?
Yeah.
I'll add a flavor to that, right? See, for example, if we are talking about that customer journey, and experience is all about how you are making that particular consumer get hooked to your platform or through any means that you're providing that experience, right? And making sure that they come back for the value that you're delivering. So it also has a significant data element also to it, and that's my spiel of the whole experience strategy, is how you can give that value in terms of the recommendations that you're providing throughout that experience journey, and how you can influence those micro moments where the customer is looking for something from you as a value to be delivered to them, as a guidance that they are asking you, right? So it just not on the journey side, but also on how you're using technology and data to provide that recommendation to them in real time, and making sure that as a whole, as an experience, you are hooked to that particular thing and you want to come back for that particular experience. At the end of the day, that repeatability is what it drives.
Yeah, and so
yeah, I'm going to talk about, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because that's a good point. Like the journey map is the basis, but it's not the end all be all, which is what we see. People come in and they're like, hey, we want a journey map. And we're like, okay, for what? Like that is not experience strategy. That is just you understanding your touch points with the customer and then trying to ideate on it. But they usually stops very short of the data strategy and the technology strategy necessary to enable it. So that's kind of how we differentiate, I think, also because we drive them to think about, okay, so then what does that mean for your business units? What does that mean for your business processes? What does that mean for the optimization of your data strategy? So I just wanted to put that in there, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk about data a little bit. So I have this belief that if we could just collect enough data on everything and fine-grained enough data on anything, then we could probably answer every question. I mean, are you seeing that?
We are slightly getting to move there, but this is a very, very interesting topic, right? See, at the end of the day, how you are consuming the data is all matters. You can have all the data you want. How you are defining those data models based on the requirements and the use cases that you have, and the manner in which it is communicated and consumed. That consumption point and the feedback loop is very, very important. So I'm sending you a bunch of recommendations. How do I know it is helpful to you, right? So those micro data points, everybody gathers it, and it is going to a place where all of that data is getting captured. But how to basically aggregate that, how to basically decipher that, how to basically consume that so that it can have that impact that it intends to, and how to basically close that feedback loop, right? That feedback loop is the most critical point. I think I would say there are very, very few organizations who has reached that maturity at this point in time. Everybody gathers data. So everybody understands the importance of data. Everybody gathers a ton of like petabytes, like everybody gathers petabytes of data. But how impactful it is, consumed and how they are bridging that gap in terms of the feedback loop. I think that's where most of them are struggling, and that's where we are trying to push that boundary in terms of how the data itself can get consumed and the way getting used the way it should be.
And so
yeah, because I have the same problem, is that I know all of these things are captured, right? We've got Apple's getting data from me, Google's getting data, Amazon, all of these services are capturing so much data about me, and they know so much about me, and they know so much about what I do and where I go and where I am and what I'm thinking and all this stuff, but they hardly ever do anything for me. Like, there's nothing proactive. They're capturing all this data, but I'm not seeing anything out of it. I mean,
that recommendation is what that recommendation is what that closed loop enables, because that suggestion or that insight, or instead of this, you do this, right? It's not, that's what is missing. So whenever you do something in real time, you will get some notification saying you are here, check out this, and so on and so forth. But understanding you the way you think and how to kind of push those relevant ones that are consumable for you, there's still gap. Some of them are there. So if you, even with Google, in some cases you will see that they are pushing something relevant to you that is consumable to you.
Very small thing.
Very small. That's very small. But at least some of them are there. That's a good thing. Okay, at least some of them are thinking that way, because eventually I think that's where the data angle is going to move. It's all about the consumability of the data and how that adoption is, and how users are adopting in terms of the recommendations that you're pushing and how useful it is for them. It's all about the consumability and the usability of the end users.
Yeah, sorry, Melissa, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, you're good. No, that was a very interesting tangent too. Well, I was gonna say, because I do want to loop it back around, because I think a lot of times it's very simple to understand how like data strategy and technology strategy augment experience and business strategy, but very few people think about it the other way. So I just wanted to give you a good example, because we're talking about kind of like the how like data strategy today in organizations may fall short. And a lot of it has to do with experience strategy. So, and Prakash will resonate with this, because we've had a few situations like this, where someone will ask us to create a data, right? And the data model is going to enable, let's say you are trying to, what is a good example? Let's say you're trying to find, I don't know, a mentor for something, right? And they are going to, you want a data model that best gives you a recommendation for the best mentor in a field that you are trying to enter. And what people don't realize is the way that you build that data model is highly contingent on the user profiles, the persona, the needs of what a good mentor means, right? So you get this like stereotypical mentorship model. And that mentorship model may only work for people who have always been in that industry, or people who are very well read in that industry. Well, what if I'm not well read in that industry? What if I just had this really great idea that that's something that I need to break into because I read an article that said I'm going to be paid 3 times as much, right? And so all of those actually change the way that you create the model. It changes the weightage of the factors that then kind of enable that recommendation. And when you work with data strategists, and we've seen this across the board, they don't think that way. They think about, well, here are all of the potential data inputs, and now let's start playing around with the recommendation. And if we get kind of the feedback at the end, then that means that we did it right, without having to think about it, think about the larger strategy of how experience actually plays into that. And that's where I'm sure you've seen like a bunch of articles around how like AI is, I don't know, racist or misogynistic or whatever, right? And
yeah, it's just reflecting our own biases. That's the thing. It's like somebody programmed that AI.
Exactly.
Yeah, somebody programmed it, but also people don't think about kind of all of the different ways that those models are going to be impacting real people. And that's kind of a really interesting gap that we try to consult our clients on.
And that's a gap that we are seeing across the board, because that front to back approach, very few of them are following, because everybody wants to use their existing data, because I think that's what they've been tuned to, and that is a mentality that we are trying to change, because there is a big gap. When you come from front to back, there is a big gap that you need to address. And I think as a team, that's what we are trying to push for all our clients.
Very cool, very cool. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 2031, 10 years from now. What's the world like?
So we've been on a kick, so like if you go down to Miami, and I have a lot of friends because
I love Miami. Miami's awesome. I love Miami.
Great. And if you go down to Miami, all the rave right now, literally anyone you speak to, they're talking about NFTs. So like everyone's talking about NFTs.
NFTs are going to be so yesterday in 2031.
But so what we've started to talk about is like, how are NFTs, how are packaged business capabilities, how is mixed reality all going to start working together to help us interact with products and services differently. So we were kind of playing around with this idea. We're doing some strategic work with video games and, down the line what that could look like for enterprises. And we were starting to play with the idea of, well, what if everything had a digital copy of yourself, of entities? So it's not just about NFTs. It's not just about, hey, here's the first tweet in the world and selling that for millions. But what if to truly own a home, you also had to own the digital property of it, because with that comes all of the data that the home harnesses. What if to truly own the data in an ecosystem and a platform, you also had to own a digital version of a company and all the partners and all the data that harnesses, right? And so then you start getting into this idea of, which kind of takes mixed reality a step further, right? And immersive reality a step further, which is like almost being able to kind of live in this data-centric world that you can also maybe visualize and also play around with. So, you use the examples of like Ready Player One and some of the things you see in Black Mirror, which are very dystopian, but you start thinking about how like NFTs and business package capabilities all start to be enablers to that. So we've thought a lot about like, okay, and I don't know if 2030 is too ambitious, but what if the world starts moving in that direction? And especially because remote work has become so popular, it's no longer about me being, me playing around with the screen in a room that then interacts with someone on the other side of the world. No, it's literally me putting little thing on the side of my head. It enters me into kind of this virtual world that I'm actually able to exchange products and services and actually interact with people and exchange monies and goods and ideas through. So we've talked a lot about that in our team.
Do you think things before you answer, I'd like to respond to that. Is like, are you saying that things are just going to become more virtual? I mean, everyone's going to have a digital twin, that's obvious. But do you think things are going to become more virtual? Like you won't buy that lamp anymore. You'll just buy a representation of that lamp. So because you're wearing your virtual headset all the time, or AR headset, you're going to be able to see that lamp there, and you pay $40 for the virtual lamp instead of the real lamp. Do you see that happening?
I think that there is definitely revenue streams that will be created of purely virtual assets, and that's kind of what we're seeing with NFTs, right? Like literally, people are paying millions of dollars for moments that have happened in real life.
I know, it's insane, right?
Think about the trend, right? And think about a generation that grows up on that, where it's more valuable to have the new Kanye West sneakers on this platform than it is to actually have them. And that's not to say that obviously there's always going to be.
You can only wear them in Fortnite. You can't wear them in Minecraft, but you can wear them in Fortnite.
Exactly. No, exactly. And so there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it, which was interesting, is like, okay, imagine if you are living and interacting in a virtual world, because it's better to interact than just on a two-dimensional screen with you. It's better to interact as if we were truly present. Well, then players like Uber may actually have additional revenue streams, because in those video games, I don't know how much you play video games, but right, to get from point A to point B, yeah, it's still takes time, right? So if I want to go from this area to this area, it's still going to take me a few seconds. Well, what if Uber actually allowed you for a very, very small percentage to go from one part of the world to the next part of the world, and they're the ones capitalizing on that? So I think it's about like, first of all, as long as fun and enjoyment is at the center of it, I think people will start flocking to those purely virtual and immersive experiences. But then it allows for companies that have very real revenue streams in the real world to start getting creative about how they can create revenue streams in that virtual world.
Right. And Prakash, what do you think?
See, one of the elements I agree with Mel. So that virtual multiverse That's going to happen. Even in the world where you're working, right? That virtual multi-world where eventually you could be in 2 meetings at once. That's going to happen, okay? In 10 years down the line. So that virtual multi-world where you can be in one, like 2 or 3 places at once, and also having your own world virtually across whatever your thought process is. That's going to happen definitely. I'm in agreement with Mel. From a corporate perspective, and this is what we've seen as well, in terms of the enterprise composability across the business units, that's going to happen no matter what, because everybody are trying to limit their budgets, and that composable enterprise as a concept will be mainstream and will be implemented by the enterprises in the next 10 years. And in the next 10 years, as a data guy, you will be selling your own data for dollars.
Yeah, right now it's worth nothing, but it'll be worth something.
You will be selling your data, and there will be buyers for your data across the globe. That is going to be a $1 trillion industry where you put the power of data in those individuals' hands, and they can sell their own data, and they want to, in the way they want to the companies that are there who wants to consume their data. This is again an internal idea that I've been working on. I'm just putting it out there.
This is interesting. Interesting. This is interesting. I want to ask you about that specifically because, I mean, I worked with the World Economic Forum back in 2010, talking about something very similar. It was right after the first big Facebook data dump. Remember, they dumped a bunch of personal information, and everyone was up in arms about how horrible it was and how people are eventually going to own their data. And we started working on projects at the time talking about people owning their data, and then eventually people will be able to sell their data and make money off their data. And what happened was there was a blip, and then it disappeared, and nobody cared about it anymore. And then it just keeps happening. There's like a breach, and then it goes away. Breach goes away. Breach goes away.
I know why it's happening. I know why.
And then there are a few companies that actually did do that. Like, I can sign up and I can sell my data, but it's for piddly numbers. It's for like a penny here, a penny there. Nobody's going to make any money about it. Do you foresee that thing increasing?
Yes, because it's all about how you are kind of designing the data to be consumable, right? That's what matters. Okay. If I am saying, see, this holds like 128 gigs of my data. Okay. I can decide how to design the data and sell it to that relevant audience the way I want to. I think that consumability, again, to the point that I was talking about, right? How you're designing those data models and how I'm thinking this could be like a trading platform in the future, right? Where somebody can bid for the amount of data that you have or the type of browser you are. I'm not going to display any of my sensitive information, obviously, but at least I can sell my behavior.
But I can get paid more if I deflate. The more sensitive the information is, the more money I can make.
Yeah, and also I can decide what information that I should share with you and what should I'm sharing with Amazon or whoever it is, right? I can take the decision, and if you're paying me $50, I can probably give you more. If you're paying me $2, I'll probably give you less. So it's a matter of how you're designing the data model to be consumable across the board. Second, how you're putting that business model out there, right? If you are able to create a case for these companies to consume the data, because they are some of them rely on their own data, but some of them purchase data from data service providers. They spend like trillions of dollars paying the data providers. If you're paying the trillions of dollars to the consumers, they'll give you the more relevant data, right? So yeah, it's a matter of how you're.
But me personally, like, when are we going to get to the point where I can just sell my data and make like a nice little revenue stream?
Exactly, that's the point. So let's say that's going to be a recurring revenue stream. It's not even like a one-time thing, right? It's going to be a recurring revenue stream for me. And people who spend like 10 hours a day on phone, that's basically, you keep spending that 10 hours a day, it's going to be money for you. So
yeah, and
so it'll happen.
And what we like, when Prakash and I, because this is what we do literally way too much when we should be working, we like talk about these things. And when I put my like product and services hat back on, and we think about, okay, Well, what if the packaging, what if the trading platform was the ability to convert all of your data into these personas that you then sell to L'Oreal, to P&G, to all of these things. And that's actually the way that you do user testing now. You create new products and do user testing based on those personas. And now let's add an extra layer to it. If we're getting closer to 2030, what if that was an immersive experience? So product testers are creating new products and are actually able to test those products in that immersive world with people who may look like you, but are backed on real data, right? And real interactions and real ways that you may have already interacted with user testing, but guess what? We don't have to keep paying you because we already paid for all of your data, and we can recreate using AI and very intelligent data models. We can recreate what those reactions and what those interactions with our products and our digital ecosystems are going to be like. So that's kind of the trains of thoughts of putting together, again, the data strategy with the product strategy, with the business strategy, and then the immersive reality technology.
In 10 years, you'll have Elon Musk's digital brain going up for $1 trillion or something.
I think it'll be sooner than that. He's going to NFT his head. But
Yeah,
we're going to see, I think your idea there where you take digital twins of people. So you create personas that are like amalgams of individuals, and you create these personas and you put them into a simulated world. And you don't have to ask customers anymore. You just ask the persona, what do you think? What do you think the customer would want? And the persona does all the stuff for you.
Nothing I'm giving you the intel, yeah.
So there you go. Patent pending.
Well, it's like the first time we heard about it. It's here. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yes. So you can email either of us. Again, my name is Melissa Rojo. So Melissa, MELISSA.ROJO @mindtree.com.
Yeah. Prakash, PRAKASH _ Pasupathy, PASUPATHY @mindtree.com again.
Awesome. Well, I'll put your contact information in the show notes. So anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can go straight to you. Thank you so much. It's been great.
This has been so much fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Friday. Thanks
Have a
so
good
much.
one. Bye-bye.
Bye.